Hello and welcome. If you are watching this live, then it is Wednesday, November 5th of 2025. We are also recording this webinar so that it can be viewed later by you or by anyone who wasn't able to attend tonight. My name is Carla Whitaker. I'm here as an academic coordinator for CalSOAP. At CalSOAP, we are the California Student Opportunity and Access Program, and everything that we do is free, and everything we do is to try to connect families, students, parents, educators with resources for college and knowledge about college going, and especially knowledge about financial aid. And so that's going to be our focus tonight, is the financial aid process for college. Now, you'll notice that in the chat, if you're participating, you won't be able to actually type into the chat, but I can type into the chat and my colleague Abby can type into the chat to do things like to put website links, for examples, if I'm referring to some websites or things like that. If you do have a question, though, if you look, for most people, depending if you're on your phone or a Mac or a PC, probably at the bottom of your screen, there is like a menu bar and there's probably a Q&A. If you don't see it says Q&A, then tap the three dots that say more, and that will bring up a Q&A, and that allows you to ask us questions. And we like questions. We are here because this is about frequently asked questions on financial aid forms. So we want you to ask questions. And if you're not comfortable asking it, like for example, if you would prefer to remain anonymous, there's a way that you can check it and ask the question anonymously so that nothing will show it with your identifying information. Sometimes people are bringing up like very individual situations or circumstances that they would like to be kept private, and we completely respect that. So you can ask a question either anonymously or not anonymously. It's up to you. But as I said, Abby is one of our college student staff, and she is going to be monitoring that Q&A for us. So she's going to answer by typing back to you any questions that she can answer. And if there's something that she feels maybe is pertinent to the whole group, she is going to unmute herself and ask that question aloud to me so that I will do my best to address it. So we will go through a slide deck and we'll talk about tips and strategies, the timeline for financial aid, and some suggestions and some frequently asked questions and answers. However, we also want to hear from you. So we will definitely leave time after the slide deck when I can address individual questions. But as we go, you're welcome to ask questions as we go. So go ahead and just put those in the Q&A, and Abby will be monitoring that for us, and we'll go ahead and get started in just a second. I do want to mention that starting tomorrow, this recording will be on our website, which is calsoapsandiego.org. We have a blog and webinar section there, and that's where it'll be posted. And also the slide deck that I'm using, which has hyperlinks to a bunch of different websites, that will also be posted there in the same place so that you can access the recording if you want to listen to it or watch it, but also you can access the slide deck itself if you want a list of those resources. So hopefully that is helpful, and I will get right into it because I know it's the end for a lot of people of a long work day and or school day. And so I want to respect your time and get into the slide deck. Let me share it and just give me a moment to do that. Apologies, this always takes me a minute to get going, and then once I get going, it will be fine. Apologies again. Let me try this one more time. Get to the first slide. Okay, so this will be overall information about financial aid, but again, we want to see your questions, so please put those in the Q&A and we will help as much as we can. And I first want to introduce CalSOAP. As I said, we're the California Student Opportunity and Access Program. Our program here, it covers both San Diego and Imperial counties, and our main mission is increase the college-going rate of students, especially among our low-income and our first-generation students. We do serve all of San Diego County, and here in San Diego, we are especially working intensively with the San Diego Unified School District, with the Sweetwater District, Grossmont, Oceanside District, and also various districts in the Imperial County. We do things like individual student college advisement at schools where there's an extremely high need. We have financial aid workshops and events. We have webinars such as this one. We have middle school, college, and career workshops and summer college prep programs as well. We also can be found on social media. We definitely recommend that you, your friends, your peers, parents, students, educators, give us a follow if you're on any of these social medias. Medium, we are on X and on Facebook at San Diego CalSOAP. And at Instagram, we're at CalSOAP San Diego. And if you're not on social media, we do also have a website, calsoapsandiego.org. So feel free to follow us or keep up with us in any of those ways. We'll try to always post information that we have that is pertinent. Okay, I'm going to give some overall advice for 12th graders. I know not everybody here might be a 12th grader, but because senior year is such an important year for financial aid, these are the main takeaways. Like if you remember kind of like these three things for your senior year, and this is all you kind of retain from this presentation, then these are the main lessons I want you to come away with. First, it's that right now the FAFSA and the DREAM Act are open. So whichever one you fill out, and I will go over which is which, but you fill out one or the other anytime between now and March 2nd. We recommend that the student starts by filling out their portion first, and then they send an invite to the parent via parent's email address, and then the parent fills out their portion. So that's my first bit of advice, is do fill out that form. My second piece of advice for 12th graders is search for and apply to multiple scholarships, because that's another form of aid that isn't covered necessarily all the time by the FAFSA. So there might be what we call maybe like outside or private or individual scholarships. And then finally, if you happen to be applying to go to an out-of-state college or a private university, some of them, in addition to the FAFSA, they would like you to fill out a second form called the CSS profile. And I will get into what that is as well. If you're planning to go to a public university or a public college in California or a community college, you probably don't need the CSS profile at all, but just check if you're going out of state or to a private, because some of them do require that in addition to the FAFSA. All right, so when I refer to financial aid, I'm referring to all kinds of different pools of money that can all go toward the student pursuing higher education options after high school. This does not have to necessarily mean a university where you live on campus, but it could mean a university where you live on campus. It could mean a two-year college like a community college. It could mean a vocational or trade school. It could mean a four-year university. It could mean any of that. And also it comprises many different types of money. So when I say financial aid as a general term, that is not necessarily all gift aid. It could be grants, it could be scholarships, it could include loans, it could include something called work study, and it could include some grants or aid from the actual state that you're going to college in. In this case, I'd be talking about California. So financial aid can come from a variety of sources, most notably the federal and the state government. A lot also comes from the colleges and universities themselves. And then there are also like both private and public organizations that sometimes fund with internships, grants, and scholarships. So all of those different sources can come together to hopefully cover some or all of a student's expenses. In terms of federal money, if you are filling out a FAFSA, that means you're filling out the free application for federal student aid. And the type of money you might be offered by the federal government might come in one of three forms. So you might be offered a federal grant. I like to help people remember that a grant is great, because a grant is free money that does not need to be repaid. It is gift aid. So if you're ever offered a grant of any type, federal, state, any kind of grant, grant means it does not need to be repaid. It is gift aid. I strongly encourage people to accept grants that they receive. The second type is borrowed money in the form of a loan. Even though I would consider a loan an investment in your future for something like your education, keep in mind this loan would have to be repaid, and it would have to be repaid with interest. So that is a family financial decision, and you want to be cautious about loans because you do have to think about, what is my return on investment? Is this degree going to help me make a certain amount of money where I would be able to pay back the loan? And then, like, will I just financially be able to do that? And so that's a family discussion. The third kind is, we call it earned money. It's work study. So it's money you never have to quote unquote pay back, but it means that you get a job, usually on campus or at the college that you're attending, that's designated a quote work study job. If it's designated work study and you're receiving a work study award as part of your financial aid package, you earn the same amount as anyone else. You get the same paycheck. You have the same taxes taken out or not taken out. And maybe you work 10 hours a week, or maybe you work 20 hours a week, the same as anybody else would. But in this case, the government is paying for all or part or all of your earnings. And so that makes you a very hireable employee to a college department. They would love to have as many work study students as possible. So if you are work study, that is a check in the positive category when they're looking to hire you, because it means less of their budget would go toward your salary and some federal funds would be supplementing that. So when I say student aid or federal student aid, it could be any or all of those three things. So back to the idea of federal work study, as I said, it employs people part-time while they're enrolled in college classes. And it's available at the undergraduate level, like if you're getting your bachelor's degree. It also is oftentimes available to graduate students who might be getting something like a master's degree or a teaching credential, a law degree, medical school, and also professional students with financial need. And it is administered by colleges who participate in the federal work study program, which is many, many colleges and universities. Also, in terms of the state of California, there's various forms of financial aid that you might qualify for if you're going to a California college, a California public, well, actually, any California college. One of those is called the Cal Grant. It is primarily a need-based grant. And so if your family is demonstrating financial need, a Cal Grant means it's something that you might get every year that you're in college for like 1, 2, 3, 4 years. There's some different classifications of Cal Grant, but basically they go toward your college education, and it's a grant. So it's free money that doesn't need to be repaid. If your family is not in a situation where it's considered, quote, low income enough, but you would consider yourself middle class, there's also a middle class scholarship. And that you also find out by filling out the FAFSA. But if you qualify for the middle class scholarship, it means that some of your tuition at a UC or a CSU, which is like a public California university, would be covered maybe by the middle class scholarship each year. And so that's a great opportunity. There's something called the Golden State Teacher Grant, where if you're studying to become a teacher, you might get some grant money that way. If you are or were from the age of 13 forward in foster care, there's also something called the Chafee Grant for foster youth, and that's additional money for college. There's also the DREAM Act has something called the Service Incentive Grant, where you're getting a grant kind of in exchange for volunteering your time in acts of service, of community service. There's also a historically Black college and university transfer grants for students who are maybe starting at a community college, but their goal is to transfer to a historically Black college or university. We also have a program here called Cal Kids, which is a scholarship that is given by the state of California to low-income families. You can check calkids.org anytime to see if you might qualify, or if you might already. Sometimes people find out they already have a $500 scholarship waiting for them. And then the various institutions also might give their own grants. For example, at the community colleges, they have something called the Promise Grant, which basically covers 100% of your tuition for 2 years for a first-time California resident doing community college. I should say a first-time college student at who is a resident of California. Also, if you're going to like a CSU, like San Diego State or CSU San Marcos, they have something called the State University Grant. And for the UCs, they have something called the Blue and Gold, which is related to family income and being able to cover the tuition portion of college costs. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about the Promise. This is something offered in slightly different ways throughout the state of California. It basically covers your entire tuition and fees for a California community college for 2 years, meaning like 4 full-time semesters, a fall and a spring, a fall and a spring. It's a grant that's available for California residents who are planning to enroll as first-year students at a California community college. And you do have to fill out either a FAFSA or a DREAM Act to then qualify for the Promise. Some colleges like Mesa, Miramar, and City, they have their own Promise grant that's kind of separate, but a lot of colleges, it's just kind of built into their college application. And unless you are a family making over like $1 million a year, it doesn't matter what your family income is. If you're a California resident, most people, regardless of their family income, will have that tuition covered if the student is a California resident and a first-time college student. So this is a really amazing grant. Tuition is a big part of the cost of college. And so to be able to get 2 years of that tuition covered is a pretty amazing program. And so I wanted to mention that to people. Okay, how do you apply for financial aid? Well, everyone, as I mentioned before, is either going to fill out the FAFSA or the California DREAM Act. Most people are not going to do both. Basically, the FAFSA, and the website for that is studentaid.gov. The FAFSA, to be eligible to fill it out, the student has to have a social security number. So you have to be either a US citizen or a permanent resident. You might also have something like called a T visa or have asylum or refugee status, and that's part of the I-94 arrival departure record, which you would know if you're in an immigration situation. It does require you to create a username password. Both the student and parent create one. So the FAFSA is one that you're going to be filling out if the student has a social security number. If the student does not have a social security number, maybe they are considered DACA, like Deferred Action for Childhood Admission. Maybe they have temporary protected status or a U visa or a U social security number. But generally, if you don't have a typical social security number, but you have lived or gone to school in California for at least 3 years, then you would fill out the DREAM Act. It's honestly a very, very similar form. The questions are almost identical. The big difference is that if you are not a documented resident, you're not eligible for any federal funding like a Pell Grant from the federal government. However, you would be eligible for California money if you were going to college in the state of California. So the one thing about the DREAM Act is if you have a non-immigrant visa, then you don't qualify to fill out the California DREAM Act. But just like the FAFSA, it requires you to create an account. I do want to mention that there are some families that we would consider mixed status families. In other words, a common scenario is the student has a social security number, but a parent does not. And sometimes the parent is hesitant to fill out a federal form, not knowing where their information is going to go. And so that fear is understandable. And if you would like to not share that information, unfortunately, the student wouldn't be eligible for federal aid. However, you still could fill out the DREAM Act. Even if the student has a social security number, there's a special question that they ask in that situation. And so if you choose not to fill out the FAFSA, you could fill out the DREAM Act instead if the student was going to attend college in California. So there are very few people, but some people are in this category where they're not eligible for the FAFSA or for the DREAM Act. And this is if you have a temporary non-immigrant visa. A common one that we see is like an H visa, for example. Any of those, if you have any of those visa types, then you're not able to fill out the DREAM Act or the FAFSA. In that case, you might have to rely on things like savings, loans, and scholarships that are open to your special category of residency. If you are in a situation where you don't want to fill out any type of financial aid form, or you're not able to fill out any type of financial aid form, I do remind people that we have in San Diego County something called the San Diego College of Continuing Education. And these classes are almost nearly all of them are free. Not only are they, it's not like they're just covered, that you don't have to fill out any type of financial aid form. You don't have to prove any type of specific citizenship status. And some of the free classes they have there include automotive classes, business, child development, citizenship, clothing, community education, digital media, English as a second language, healthcare, hospitality, culinary, information technology, and also some skilled trades like welding. So this is a fantastic opportunity if you are not able or not willing to fill out a financial aid form, but you want to get some free education. They have various satellite campuses all over San Diego County. So consider the San Diego College of Continuing Education. Okay, so what is the deadline here? What is the timeline? When are these apps due? The FAFSA, it opens this year. It opened actually before October 1st, and so they're open now. If your student is the class of 2026, so if you're currently a high school senior, you're going to fill out the 26-27 FAFSA. I know that can sound a little counterintuitive because I know right now it's 25-26 school year. However, you're filling out the FAFSA for the first year you're going to be a college student, which I'm presuming is the 26-27 school year. There's not a hard deadline when the form just turns off until like next September, but the priority deadline in the state of California is March 2nd of 12th grade. So March 2nd of 2026 is your priority deadline, but the form is already open. I've worked with many students who have already filled it out. They are done. They are ready to go. They're ready to hear from the colleges what their financial aid package is going to be. So that's exciting that you could get that out of the way as early as now if you wanted to. What kind of questions is the FAFSA going to ask you? So it will ask you how many people are in your family, the family size, how many people live in your household. It will ask about the student income if the student had a job. It'll ask about parent income if the parent had a job. You do have to get permission to connect to IRS tax returns. Even if you don't fill out taxes, that's okay. You're not required to necessarily because some people don't have an income that's high enough to do that. However, you still have to give permission so that they can check. What you're going to be using is your 2024 W-2, like for work if you had a job, and also it'll ask student and parent assets like savings, 529 plans, investments, rental properties, anything like that. If you have a small business or a farm, it will ask the value of that. One thing to note is they are not going to require the value of the home you live in if you happen to own it. It will also not ask you to report your retirement accounts like a 401k. Your home is your home and it's not considered an asset in terms of FAFSA, okay? However, if you own a second property and you rent it out for extra money, that would be considered an asset. If you have a savings account or stocks and bonds, yes, that's an asset you have to report. But if it's a retirement account specifically like a 401k, no, that's for your retirement. So they're not going to consider that an asset. And usually the parent or parents' income will continue to be considered by the government until the student reaches age 24, unless, and there are some situations like unless the student themselves gets married, has a baby of their own, has children, dependents, unless they join the military, if they are a foster student, or if they are homeless and unaccompanied. So there's like a few situations. Oh, and or if they're legally emancipated. When we say who is a contributor, so the first contributor to a FAFSA is the student. They have to contribute their own information. If the student happens to be married, this is more of a rare situation, but if the student is married, their spouse is also a contributor. And then the other contributor is their biological or adopted adoptive parent or parents. And that parent's spouse. It could be mom and dad are married to each other, but it could also be that you have a step parent. So the step parent, if the contributor parent is married to someone other than the student's biological parent, then that is considered the quote household, and those are considered the contributors. Here's what a contributor is not. You will never list your grandparent as your contributor, even if you live with them, even if they claim you on taxes, even if they're providing for you financially, they're not considered your contributor. So you don't have to count their income. Your foster parents are not your contributors. Even your legal guardians are not considered your contributors. You're considered independent if you are in a legal guardianship. Your siblings are not your contributors. Your aunts, your uncles, none of those people, even if they have helped raise you, even if they've helped provide for you, they're not considered contributors on the FAFSA. So you don't have to report and should not report their income or their assets. Just to pause there, any questions about that? Okay. All right. So the first question we usually ask is to figure out, well, who is the contributor or who are the contributors to this form? And we start with the question, are your parents married to each other? If they are, then you report both parents' information. And oftentimes they file taxes jointly, and that makes it pretty easy. However, if your parents are not married to each other, the next question is, do your parents live together? If they do, then yes, once again, you report both of your parents' information. Let's say your parents do not live together. If the answer to that is no, then the question becomes, which parent provided more financial support in the last 12 months? Okay. Notice it doesn't say who makes more money, and it doesn't say who claimed the student on taxes. It's saying which parent provided more financial support. That is a little bit subjective, and you can choose to interpret that. There's a little bit of subjectivity in interpreting what exactly that means. For example, like who housed you more often, or who fed you or clothed you or provided health insurance, that type of thing. Okay, so if that parent is not remarried, okay, then you report only that parent's information. But if that parent that provided more financial support is remarried, now you're reporting both the parent and whoever they're remarried to, whoever they're married to, your step parents' information and their income and assets. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I know that people are often in some very complicated situations when it comes to this, and they have special situations. And that's why we're here to answer questions about, okay, wait, who is my contributor? Is it one parent? Is it both? Is it, I know there's a lot of complication that can arise. The contributor doesn't mean that they're contributing any money to college. The contributor is anyone who is required to contribute information on this form. So they're providing information about their income and assets. It doesn't mean they have to contribute any money at all. Okay. They do need an account. Okay. So if you're filling out the FAFSA, for example, you have to create your own FSA ID. Students create one, and parents create their own separate one with a separate email address. Okay. In the case of the DREAM Act, if you happen to be filling out the DREAM Act, the student contributor needs the account, but the parent contributors do not necessarily need their own account. That's just for FAFSA. Some of the questions that they're going to be asking you when you go to fill out a form like the FAFSA is your full legal name, your date of birth, your social security number, although that's required for the student only. The parent doesn't necessarily have to have one. Your address, your personal email address, we recommend using like a Gmail or an iCloud and not your school assigned email address, because you want to keep using this email after you even graduate high school. Although a phone number is optional, we highly recommend a cell phone number so they can send things like a backup code and verifications. And then you'll have to create your own username and password, and you keep that backup code. As far as for a DREAM Act account, it's almost the same thing. They will ask for all the same information, except in this case, they're not going to give you a backup code, and the student contributor needs to create an account. The parent doesn't have to create a separate one in the case of the DREAM Act. Okay, so here is the key that a lot of parents know. I'm hearing about this number. It used to be called the EFC, the Expected Family Contribution. Now it's called the SAI, or the Student Aid Index, and it's just a number. Even though it's technically a quote unquote dollar amount, it does not mean that you have to pay anyone that money, okay? It's not being charged by anyone. It's just a formula that they use to determine financial aid. Now, your SAI, your Student Aid Index, could range. The lowest it could be is negative 1,500. If you have an SAI of negative 1,500, it means that you would qualify for the maximum amount of need-based aid. It could be negative 500, it could be 0, it could be 1,000, it could be 5,000, it could be anything up to almost $1 million, okay? So if your SAI is negative or 0, the student would very likely qualify for a maximum federal Pell Grant and probably other state and college grants and aid as well. So if you have a lower SAI, that means you're going to qualify for a lot of need-based financial aid. They say, for example, if you are applying for a California State University EOP, Early Opportunity Program, most of those students, to qualify, they have to have an SAI of under 1,500. Sometimes it's under 2,000 if they're a first-generation college student. But that type of low SAI, from the negative to 0 to about 1,500 to 2,000, that will qualify them for a lot of like low-income student support. If you have a higher SAI where it's up above 2,000, you might qualify for less need-based or maybe even no need-based aid. You might be offered a loan, but just keep in mind that if you choose to take a loan, that it would require repayment. I'm just going to use a sample family. I just went and typed this into studentaid.gov's aid estimator to see, okay, if I have 4 people in my family, let's say there's 2 parents and 2 kids, and my annual family income, whether maybe that's both parents working combined or maybe one parent works and one stays home, let's say their annual family income is about $75,000. If you have a family of 4, we're going to predict that your student aid index at that amount is $0. Okay, but if your family size is bigger or smaller, that can change. If your income is bigger or smaller, that can change. So it depends on your personal situation, but you can find out, you can get an estimate of what you think that SAI would be. And then that's a number that college financial aid offices want to use to give you aid. Okay, so we haven't talked yet about scholarships, but scholarships are another fantastic form of ways of paying for college. And yes, you can accept loans and grants and work study and scholarships all at the same time. They can all go into your financial aid package. A scholarship is a gift. It does not have to be repaid like a grant, so that's great. Some of them are need-based, okay, based on financials. Some of them are not need-based. It could be based on something like academics or achievements or identity. Many are targeted toward very specific groups of people. They usually require a separate application, and there is no rule for scholarships. It could be for $100, it could be for $100,000. They have their own applications, they have their own deadlines, they have their own requirements. So unfortunately, scholarships can be a lot more work, but a lot of people supplement their financial aid with various scholarships. And yes, you can accept multiple scholarships at the same time if you are offered them, if you earn them. How do you find scholarships? Well, I would say search for them. Whether you're a senior or not yet a senior, it's time to be searching for scholarships. Talk to your high school counselor or your college, and if you have a college and career center, ask your college and career guidance technician, how do I look for scholarships? Find out if your school has a website that lists them, find out if your school district has a website that lists them, and really explore the local ones. Like, for example, locally, we have something called the San Diego Foundation Scholarship. It will open up in January, and it's usually due in early March, and it brings together lots of scholarships that are only for students from San Diego County, which is great. We have another good local one called the Ford Salute to Education, from the Ford Motor industry. So really explore local opportunities, because the more local it is, the less competition, the less national competition there is. So there might only be 10 people applying for a scholarship instead of 10,000, okay? Now, I did mention one more financial aid form. If you are going to a private or out-of-state university, they might require this thing called the CSS profile. As a joke, we kind of refer to it as FAFSA's nosy cousin, okay? Um, it's run through the College Board, and here's some examples of universities that require that CSS: Brown University, Caltech, Harvard, NYU, Yale, Stanford. Those are just examples of universities that, yes, even if you filled out the FAFSA, they would like you to fill out the CSS profile, which gets even more into your family financials. It does cost money to fill out the CSS. It's $25 plus $16 per college that you're applying to. However, the fee waivers are available that make it free if your family adjusted gross income annually is under $100,000. Okay, so now we're getting into the FAQs, the financial aid frequently asked questions, and we'll give you a chance to ask your questions as well. Okay, I'm filling out this form. When am I going to find out how much financial aid I'm getting? Like, what is a college going to offer me? What is that timeline? When do I actually find out? So usually you find out around March or April of 12th grade. That's when the college, if it's a university, they've decided maybe to accept you or not accept you. And if you are accepted and you've filled out a FAFSA or a DREAM Act, then around March or April is when their financial aid office is going to send you what's called a financial aid package, like an offer. Usually you have until May 1st. That's their intent to register deadline, when you have to decide, okay, I'm committing to one specific college. So that's why they send out those packages in March or April, so that you can use those to decide where you're going to go, usually by May 1st. The college financial aid offices, they share the packages in the spring after the acceptances. So in other words, they're not going to send it to someone who maybe didn't get accepted or didn't express interest or didn't apply there. They're only going to send it to students who were accepted. And I know this is the real big question: how much need-based financial aid for college will my family receive? Well, it depends on your family size, income, and assets. It depends on the college you plan to go to and that college's cost of attendance. Again, colleges will send accepted applicants a financial aid package, usually in March or April. And a tool I recommend to predict what will my future aid be, like what will my SAI, my student aid index, be? Is it going to be high? Is it going to be low? If you go to studentaid.gov, they have this thing called the aid estimator. You're not filling out a real FAFSA. You can even put in fake information if you want, but it gives you an idea. Like, you can play around and say, okay, what if I were a family of 8? What if I were a family of 2? What if my income were 30,000 a year or 50,000 a year or 200,000 a year? What would my SAI be according to that? And so it gives you an estimate of what your SAI is maybe likely predicted to be. It's not filling out a real official form. It's just an estimator. Okay, some families are going to say, hey, we make too much money. We're not being offered any grants. All we're being offered is loans. Should we still bother to fill out a financial aid form if we know our SAI is going to be high? And I tell people, yes, you absolutely still should fill out a financial aid form like the FAFSA or the CADA or the CSS profile. This is the only way you will know if the student qualifies for any federal or state financial aid. It's also the only way college financial aid offices will consider students for any college aid, often even non-need-based aid. It's required even if you're qualifying for military aid through CalVet. You still have to fill out the FAFSA. If you're getting the California Community College Promise Grant for being a California resident, part of that is you still have to fill out the FAFSA. If you're filling out the San Diego Foundation scholarship, just to fill out their scholarship application, you have to fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. And the same if you're maybe applying to a UC or a CSU and you're hoping to get the middle class scholarship, how do you find out if you qualify for it? You fill out the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. So all of those things, that your pathway to it is filling out that financial aid form. So even if you're not getting federal money, the colleges will be using that information, sometimes even to give you an identity-based or a department-based or a merit-based form of financial aid. So definitely still fill it out is my recommendation. Can a student accept both grants and scholarships? Yes, students can accept multiple forms of financial aid simultaneously. Scholarships could reduce the amount of grants and other aid, but not until it would actually exceed the total cost of attendance. All right. So as long as it stays under the cost of attendance, you can accept multiple scholarships and multiple aid simultaneously. Am I obligated to accept a loan if one is offered to me? This can be scary. I don't want a loan, but they offered me one. Do I have to take it? No. If you are offered a federal loan, such as a PLUS loan, the parent loan for undergraduate students, or any other loan, whether it's from the state or federal government, whether it's from a private institution, a credit union, your personal bank, you are not obligated to accept it. You might apply for it. They'll tell you, we can offer you this much at this interest rate, and you can either say yes or no, thank you. All right. So don't feel like you're ever obligated to accept it, even if it's offered. What is the difference between a loan to the parents and a loan to the student in the case of a financial aid loan? So this is pretty important to know. Parents, if you are the person co-signing a loan, it's your promissory note. Parent loans, you actually begin making monthly payments right away. So if you get that loan in September and the student starts school in September, your first loan repayment that bill will come in September or October. Okay. So if it's a parent loan, you do have to begin making monthly payments right away, just like the same way you would make monthly payments on a mortgage or a car payment. For the student, if you're being offered a student loan specifically to go to college, usually students don't need to begin repayment until after college graduation. In fact, until 6 months after college graduation. And that is actually deferred again if the student is then going into graduate school, like a master's or a doctorate program. Okay. So just consider that the parents often take on a loan burden because they have a credit history. The students are often offered less money because they don't have a credit history yet. But the student loan, in a way, it's advantageous in the sense that you don't need to start repaying it until after graduation. But the parent loan, you got to start repaying that right away. Okay, what about merit aid? If you don't qualify for need-based aid because your income is quote unquote too high, you might still qualify for other aid. Sometimes it's called merit aid. Even for that type of aid, the first thing the college financial aid office wants to know is, did you fill out the FAFSA or did you fill out the DREAM Act? Or in some colleges, did you fill out the CSS profile? Colleges will package together multiple sources like federal grants, state grants, college grants, loans, work study, multiple scholarships from multiple sources. They'll package them all together and tell you what you're getting total. And hopefully that's a nice big fat package. We never know. But yes, it's important to fill it out even if you are looking for non-need-based aid. The first thing the college financial aid office will ask is, have you filled out this financial aid form? A couple suggestions and tips for families before we get to the end of the slide deck is I do want people to know that we have a really great community college system in California. They all have transfer pathways where if you're taking certain curriculum, they often call it the CalGETSI or the iGETSI curriculum, that you can then apply to finish your junior and senior year at a four-year university. And locally, there are even some community colleges that offer bachelor's programs for a community college price, which is pretty amazing. So consider, as far as financially, the community colleges are an amazing option. You also want to discuss this as a business discussion. If you're into business, you probably know what ROI is, return on investment. If you're going to invest, if you're going to borrow $20,000 a year or invest $20,000 a year of your savings into a college education, you have to ask yourself, what's the return on investment? Is that student going to go on to get a job that pays really well, where that investment is then going to pay off for them or for our family? So that's an important thing to discuss if you're considering this a business decision, and it is a financial discussion. It is a financial decision. You want to discuss whether or not you are going to accept loans. And if you do, ask yourself, what's the maximum we're willing to accept per year? Okay, so have a guidance for yourself, have a rule for yourself. Sometimes people work so hard to get into college, they get into their dream college, they find out they're going to have to get a loan to go there. And sometimes a parent will just say, I don't care, it's your dream, we'll borrow anything. And that's not necessarily feasible or sustainable. So really have an honest money discussion, like what is the maximum we can accept in loans per year? Also consider what is the right fit, not just what is the reputation. I know everybody says, I want to go to Stanford, I want to go to Harvard, I want to go to NYU, just because they have like very old established reputations. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll even have the major that you want to study. What is right for you? Is it near or close or far from home? What is the environment like? Are there big classes, small classes? Are there internships? What's the graduation rate? You want to consider all the things that might make a college a good fit for you, not just its overall reputation that you've heard, or not just that they have a fantastic Division I basketball team. Nothing wrong with that, though. All right, if you are saving and saving money for college, I would consider a 529 savings plan. The reason is because if you save it there, it is tax deferred. And once the student is actually using it for college expenses, it's not just tax deferred, it's tax exempt. So as a family, if you have like a tax professional or a financial professional, a financial advisor, ask them, should I be saving in a 529? And I think it's a great advantage as far as a tax advantage for the family. However, you are also welcome to save it in a jar, under your mattress, in a savings account, invest in stocks or cryptocurrency or whatever you like. But that is just an idea, is that the 529 plan does make it tax exempt. So that's one that we recommend. Okay, so CalSoap, again, we have our website, calsoapsandiego.org, where this recording and slide deck will be. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and X. We have a YouTube account. Over summer and the beginning of the year, we had our Jumpstart Senior Year events. We have monthly newsletters we publish, monthly webinars. We have college readiness coaches like Abby who are working in local schools with students. We have Cash for College workshops. And if you need individual help filling out your FAFSA or DREAM Act, just for example, coming up next Saturday, November 15th, we have, I think, 4 or 5 different locations around the county where we're offering parents and students free help with their FAFSA. If you can't physically come to a location, we also have virtual ones once a month on Wednesday evening. So we're having one in 2 weeks. I think it's on November 19th in the evening, where people can come and get individual private help with their FAFSA or DREAM Act application, and it's free. I'm also going to mention some of these resources. Some of these I mentioned throughout the slide deck. Our website, CalSoap San Diego. Also, cacareerzone.org is great. Workforce.org, ONET Online, explorehealthcareers.org, californiacolleges.edu is excellent. Big Future, My Majors, and part of our CalSoap San Diego website, we also have a scholarship page. CalKids is another great scholarship site, fastweb.com, the San Diego Foundation. So anyway, all of these will be available on the slide deck, and I will go ahead and stop sharing now. Okay. Anything in the Q&A that hasn't, okay, in addition to the, oh, the Kyoto Prize is open. Oh, that's good to know. Excellent. Okay, yes, even though there's the common scholarship for the San Diego Foundation, they also do have individual ones like the Kyoto Prize Scholarship, which kind of require their own separate application. And so that's a great opportunity. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's at sandiegofoundation.org. All right. Okay, I see some answered questions, but I don't see any other open questions. So if there is nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and thank Abby for doing the Q&A. Thank everybody for attending, and we will go ahead and conclude this, and you can see it online starting tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Good night.